When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, Doghouse. User, TTR33. Posted, May 3rd, 1999.
I should have known Charlie was up to something after he started bringing candles into the office. When you tend bar in a dive like the Doghouse, you get used to seeing weird shit come through the door. In the week leading up to the fire alone, a guy brought in his elderly German Shepherd, its back legs, and a kind of sling wheelchair deal. And I had to 86 a group of guys in T-Rex costumes that covered everything except their dicks. It was that kind of place. To improve our margins, Charlie had made a few stabs at, shall we say, courier work, so I knew well enough to leave any and all unmarked parcels on his desk without asking questions. Then Ray, our new barback, knocked one newly arrived carton onto the floor, where it split open, sending fat black candles everywhere. "The fuck is this?" I recall saying to no one in particular. "Maybe Charlie's starting a goth night," Ray volunteered. He was new, so I couldn't entirely fault him for not knowing that the closest would ever come to a theme night was the time a SWAT team came through the windows after dispatch had given them the wrong address. It was a fair guess, though, because why the hell else would a bar need what looked like leftover props from The Craft? When asked, Charlie was cagey about the whole thing and brushed me off. He'd done it before, most notably just ahead of those straight-to-the-back office brown paper packages arriving via taxicab, and the fact he was doing it again made me nervous. No matter how much I pestered Charlie, he refused to talk about the reason behind that particular delivery. Things then got weirder when he declared his office completely off limits. If he was in there, he said, he wasn't to be disturbed and no one was to come inside. He even went so far as to have locks installed on the door, which was almost comical given how flimsy it was. Still, I respected his wishes and tried not to think about whatever he was cooking up inside. And honestly, cooking didn't seem all that far off because standing only a couple feet away from that door when he was in there, I could smell smoke and feel heat. Rationally, I knew he couldn't be cooking with just a few candles, and yet how else to explain what I felt? When you spend as much time in a place as I used to in the Doghouse, small changes quickly become obvious. Air pressure was the first thing, a kind of heaviness that pressed down harder on you the later it got. Vibes changed, the end of night crowd getting even more hard-edged than they already were. Within a couple days of that shift, there was a stabbing in the men's bathroom, our first in close to a decade. Weirdly, Charlie not only was fine with it, he actually seemed encouraged. telling me to close early. Ray was tasked with mopping up the blood until I heard a scream from the rear, followed by him charging through the now empty bar and out the front door. He never came back. Word of that attack spread around the neighborhood, and a solid chunk of our weekday regulars suddenly stopped coming by. Even people who dug our whole funky neighborhood watering hole thing apparently drew the line at aggravated assault, and I couldn't blame them. Despite the slow weeknights and increasingly rough and tumble weekends, mostly populated by skinheads drinking long necks of Rhinelander, Charlie claimed we were making more money than ever before. It wasn't hard to see that this made no sense at all. Where was the money coming from? The delivery rate of those tightly wrapped brown paper packages hadn't increased, so it wasn't the drugs. A couple more boxes of candles had come through, but I couldn't possibly thread the needle on how that could be connected. In the end, I decided whatever was happening, my paychecks were still cashable, so I was just gonna keep my head down until that changed. It was late on a Wednesday, a closing shift, that I finally found out what Charlie had been up to. There was maybe an hour left before I could lock the door, and about the same since I had a customer. The change in air pressure had become so commonplace by this point that I hardly noticed it coming on, occupied as I was by slicing lemons that the day shift claimed they'd been too busy to do themselves. A series of explosions from behind me caused me to jump, inadvertently slashing a long red furrow in my left hand. As if in slow motion, I watched my blood seep from the wound, a deep red oozing across the cutting board until it enveloped the yellow lemon slices like a rising tide. Cursing, I shook myself and grabbed the nearest towel, wrapping it around my bleeding hand. The explosions had been glasses bursting, a common enough experience to anyone who's worked in a bar, except it was usually one or two at a time. Not every single piece of fucking glassware. My feet, the floor, and the bar itself were covered in glittering shards. There was no way in hell I intended to clean all that up myself, so I carefully stepped out from behind the bar, bound for Charlie's office. His door was closed, that strange heat noticeable a full 5 away. My cut was bleeding freely through the towel around it, leading me to be a little less polite than usual. Rather than knocking, I entered the office to find the lights off, and Charlie sitting at the center of the room, surrounded by 5 lit candles. In their flickering glow, I could see his desk and chair pushed up against one wall, and next to them was someone I had never seen before. They were tall and thin, standing far enough away from the circle of light that I could only discern their outline. Immediately upon seeing that figure, a spiral of nausea ran up my chest, and I projectile vomited the bag of chips I'd had for dinner all over my shoes. Charlie wheeled on me, shouting something I couldn't hear over the sudden pounding in my head. When I was finally able to stand again, the tall man was gone. Since I was blocking the only possible exit, it made sense that he had been a trick of the light as opposed to a real person. There wasn't much time to think about it, though, since Charlie was still raging at me, and I mean raging, spittle flying from his lips as he screamed at the top of his lungs. In the years we've been working together, I had seen him mad, but never like this. "What did I tell you about coming in here? Are you fucking stupid?" It went on like that. Since I couldn't get a word in edgewise, my only move was to raise my towel-wrapped hand, now thoroughly soaked with blood. That seemed to snap him out of it, his face losing some of his mottled fury. "Oh Christ, Sean, what happened?" While he helped patch me up with the aid of a first aid kit, I explained the situation, starting with this strange atmosphere Doghouse had taken on. He looked sheepish. "Shit, you noticed that, hey? Has anyone else?" He had to be kidding, I thought, but no, he was completely serious. Whatever Charlie was into, it had him so engrossed he was totally disconnected from what was happening in the bar. I told him about how things have fallen off since the stabbing, most of our regulars steering clear, leaving room for an element best described as unusually undesirable, even for us. For a moment, he stared vacantly into the distance before shaking his head. "That's fine. We have the money. I'll find a way to balance things out, get them back." This was cryptic, even for Charlie, and in my frustration, I demanded an answer for how it is we could have the funds. Who was the man I'd seen in the office? At that, an unusual look came over his face, a kind of panicked uncertainty he'd never before shown. "Don't ask about him. Don't ever ask about him. All you need to know is that he's our benefactor. I light some candles, say a few words, and he makes sure that as long as this bar is standing, it never runs out of money. I never run out of money. Simple as that." Simple as that, sure. Even if Charlie didn't know that was bullshit, I did. He was the only person I've ever known who could casually tell you he was invoking otherworldly forces to pay his bills and expect you to accept it. I'm not sure what it says about the length of time I'd been working at the Doghouse that such a revelation didn't immediately cause me to give my notice. What I did was the same thing I always do. Wait for the final domino to fall, hoping it didn't land squarely on my head. It didn't take long. When I say that Welfare Wednesday was a real thing in our bar, I don't want you to think it means all people on social assistance use it to buy booze. Some, though, they do, and it's for them that Welfare Wednesday was named. On the Doghouse's final night, it should have been packed with reprobates pissing away their checks. Instead, it was a ghost town. Me up at the front, polishing glasses, while Charlie was tucked away in the back, inviting trouble into our lives by candlelight. Shortly after midnight, a smell hit my nostrils, unmistakably that of rotting meat. A second later, and the overhead lights dimmed as if somewhere outside a transformer was about to blow. It had to be Charlie and whatever the fuck he was messing with. I briefly wondered if I should go back and try to shake him out of whatever stupor he'd been lulled into, but never got the chance. As the rank meat smell intensified, I could feel the back office's heat radiating out further than ever before. A primal part of me screamed out from deep inside that something was very wrong. As if to drive that point home, the faded green wallpaper behind the bar began to bubble, then blacken. In the blink of an eye, it burst into flames. I stumbled back, my arms windmilling. Bottles of liquor cracked, then shattered, sending pungent streams of alcohol racing down the bar. This was beyond the capabilities of the ancient fire extinguisher in the back. Not that I stood a chance of getting at it anyways. It didn't take a genius to know that whatever was going on started in Charlie's office, and that my best option was to get the hell out of there. So I ran. As I left the doghouse for the final time, I turned to see a tall, thin shadow step out of the wall, lazily running a long black finger down the pockmarked bar. Its movements left trails of tiny flames, feeding on the spiderweb trails of alcohol until they looked like nothing so much as hell's own burning road atlas. Charlie had been right. His benefactor could keep his bills paid so long as the bar continued to stand. Where my old boss's imagination failed him was in not being able to understand how easily the things we build can be taken apart.
Subject, Lucky Strike. User, Scene C2. Posted, August 12, 1998.
The doctors gave me 6 months, maybe less. It's in my bones now. Spine lit up like a Christmas tree on the last scan. I'm not scared, just tired. Been working my way toward this for a long time. I think we all know when the horizon's getting closer. You feel it in your hands, like gravity's pulling a little harder than it used to. No big deal, just another part of a long life. I don't have kids, no wife, and I've made peace with that. But as I prepare to go and reflect on my years meandering my way on Earth, I keep coming back to my time with Danny and what happened when he passed. Now that my time is near, that lone memory no longer haunts me or fills me with sadness. Now I feel hope. I was 21 at the time, living in a 2-bedroom above a laundromat in Wilkinsburg, working nights at the paper plant and drinking too much. Well, way too much. I wasn't dealing well with life as it was, but then Danny died and it really tipped the scale for me. It was a car accident, back road, rain slick. He lost control and hit a tree. They said it was instant, but that doesn't help those who were left behind with a hole in their heart shaped like someone who they loved. Someone who used to laugh at your dumb jokes, rib you when you needed tough love, and remembered to give you a hand when you were struggling. And look, here's the thing. Danny and I had known each other since we were 7, so it was a big hole for sure. We grew up on the same street, rode the same school bus, smoked our first cigarette in the woods behind his grandma's house. He was the one person in the world who got me. Not in the half-assed, pretend way people say they understand you. I mean the real way. I could sit next to him and not say a word for an hour and would still walk away knowing what the other was feeling. After he died, I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just sat on the floor of my apartment with a bottle of rye and one of his old flannel shirts, waiting for it to feel real. It never did. Then, 2 weeks later, it was raining. Same kind of drizzle that makes your bones ache. I was up late watching TV without sound, just flipping through the fuzz. Couldn't sleep. And then I smelled smoke. Not fire, cigarette smoke. Danny smoked Lucky Strikes. No filter. It was his trademark, even after everyone else switched to Winston's or Camels. Said if you were going to do something bad for you, you might as well do it all the way. That night, the smell came in soft, just a whiff at first. I thought maybe someone was smoking outside, but then it got stronger. Thick, like someone was right next to me. I turned the TV off and found my apartment was dead quiet. But there he was, just standing in my kitchen, wearing the same jacket he died in. Denim with the shearling collar. Still had the grease stain on the pocket from when we fixed up that old Ford together. He didn't glow, didn't float, just stood there. One shoulder leaned against the counter like he always did when we'd hang out. My throat closed up. I couldn't move. He looked at me and smiled. Crooked, sheepish, the way he used to when he'd borrowed something he knew I'd be mad about. "Hey, Ray," he said. That's it, just hey. I don't remember standing up, just that I was across the room before I even knew it. But when I reached for him, my hand passed right through. Not cold, not warm, just empty. He didn't even flinch, just looked at me with those same brown eyes and said, "It's okay, I'm not staying." I sat down on the floor and I didn't ask what he was. I didn't ask why. I just listened. He told me he'd been trying to get through since the funeral. Said it didn't feel right to leave without saying goodbye. Said he'd been waiting for me to stop being so damn stubborn. "You don't have to carry it, Ray," he said. "The guilt, the what-ifs, let 'em go." I hadn't said anything about guilt, but he knew. I was supposed to be in the car with him. We were gonna meet at Rudy's that night, get some burgers and hit the jukebox, but I'd stayed late at work, had a deadline, didn't call, didn't show, so he drove out alone in the rain. If I'd been there, maybe I could have taken the wheel. Maybe I would have kept him talking. Maybe. "You didn't kill me," he said. "Don't turn my memory into a weapon." I wanted to argue, wanted to scream at him, but instead, I started to cry. Quiet, ugly sobs that racked my chest and emptied something inside me I didn't know I'd been holding on to. Danny just sat next to me. Didn't say anything, didn't have to. We sat there for a long time. Maybe hours. Time got weird. At one point, he pulled a cigarette from his jacket, a Lucky Strike, of course, lit it, and I don't know how, but it glowed, the smoke curling up into the ceiling. "You remember that time we skipped school and went out to the quarry?" he asked. I laughed. First time in weeks. "You got stung by a hornet," I said, "swelled up like a grapefruit. You laughed so hard, you threw up," he added. We talked a little while longer, little memories, dumb stuff, the time we snuck into the drive-in, the night we both tried to dye our hair blonde and came out orange, the way he used to draw band logos on his sneakers. Finally, he stood. "Gotta go," he said. "Where?" I asked. He just smiled. "Wherever it is we go." He flicked his cigarette into the sink and The ember didn't die right away. It just hung there, glowing like a star through the fog. "I'm gonna see you again, right?" He did not answer, just gave me a little salute and faded like breath on a cold window. I don't know what that night was. A dream, a vision, a kindness from something bigger than us, but I think he came back because he knew I needed it. Needed him. And now, laying here in this rented bed, body failing, lungs rasping, I keep thinking about that night. I think when I go, he'll be there again, leaning against the counter, cigarette in hand, telling me I'm late. If that's death, I'm okay with it.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.